Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And my people, we are here with over 250 episodes published. What a crazy thought process. And actually, if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen that I've been posting sentiments from each of the guests that I'd like to feature in this episode. And when making the artwork, I'm like, whoa. There's a lot of episodes. Plus, what a lineup of guests, guys. To be in this position, I just can't quite believe it at times. And being able to essentially put all of this together, it was like, whoa, you know, I feel like the podcast and what I can offer you guys through the guests that come on, I feel like it's still very much a hidden gem in the world because, of course, there's billions of people in the world, right? And I'm very grateful that when I speak with a lot of you guys, you do say that actually people from all walks of life could benefit from the podcast because it is beyond condition, right? It's beyond the conditions we reach as bodybuilders. It's the mindset. It's all of the challenges we can go through. The guests that come on, it's not just bodybuilding. There's so much to explore. And that, of course, lends itself well to Sarah's brain, the crazy brain that I have. And I must always remind you guys of my story and where that started. That started with a dream. And to anyone listening that has a dream, this is what I'll always say: go after it like your life depends on it. Do things you never thought you would or you never thought possible. Some of the guests that I reach out to, you can imagine I'm like, hi, I run a podcast. Would you like to come on as a guest? And of course, over the years, even that in itself, the way I write to people, the way that I form these relationships has evolved because at the root of it, guys, I'm rooting for myself. I believe in myself. I believe what I can bring to the guests, to the listeners, is worth something. It's quantifiable to my moral compass and me having a dream, dreaming so big that now it's achievable. It's like, whoa. And what this brings is it goes beyond self-belief because you start to think, okay, what else can I do? What else can I explore? Not just as a podcast host, not just as a bodybuilder, but as a human being. And that's important as well. When we look at anything in life, any challenges that just seem almost unreachable, what are the steps to get there? Because it starts with that first step. I took 6 months to contemplate starting a podcast, getting artwork together, thinking about what my intros would be. I'd walk along with no music in my headphones, but with headphones in, and I run through how I'm going to intro each guest, what I'm going to talk about. And it's now formulated into being one of the most successful podcasts in the UK. In August, we reached 75,000 monthly downloads. Like, what the actual fuck? I'll say it, guys. Like, whoa, how is that even real? It's my reality, it's your reality because you're part of this. You are part of the beat in my heart that gets me to do the things that I do for the podcast. At the end of this episode, I'm going to give a little bit of an insight into what it actually takes to build a podcast because for sure I've had a lot of people reach out over the years to say, should I start a podcast? What does that involve? So I will save that till the end because I want to go through the guests that are going to feature in this episode and actually the sentiments that they have shared. So essentially, what I did was listen back to some of the episodes, scroll through the episodes, but also from my photographic memory, I was able to recall quite a few of the quotes just in my head because they are things that have stuck with me. And that's why I believe sharing them again, if they've stuck with me from, over 13 years of bodybuilding, perhaps they have stuck with you, perhaps they have helped you on your bodybuilding journey. And a lot of them really do hit home for me of essentially how far I've come, but also what is the why, the fire in my belly to keep doing what I'm doing, and can I remind myself of that because we get lost in life, and it's so true because you wake up each day, right, and you don't know what's going to happen that day. We can have our structure, we can have our schedule, We can have what we are looking, to achieve in each and every day. However, life at times is pretty fucking savage. And we sometimes get dealt these cards where it's like, why is this happening to me? Why has this card been dealt? And I always draw this back to what can we learn in this period of time. Now, the first sentiment I want to share with you was actually from Rob Latty, who has been on the podcast multiple times. He is the top of his game as a mindset coach in the UK, and he actually joined us for a webinar. So if you haven't listened to this, I would actually say potentially this is one of the most biggest standout episodes over the whole nearly 4 years. It was just there's something within how it just flowed, how much value there was in regards to building a rock solid mindset. And that was the episode. And Rob said on the episode, you were born a clean slate. Everything you do is a learnt behavior. And that sentiment, wow, it's true. We forget this, the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, the thoughts we have, the feelings we have, who surrounds us, what we do. It's all learned behavior. You're literally born as this little bambino, and it's like, yes, there's influence from people in your life and your environment. There's encouragement, there's negativity, there's everything in between. But you are born into this world as that little bambino, and essentially everything we do then gets learned, and it makes up our day-to-day life. It makes up our past, our present, and potentially there is thought processes into the future based on our experiences in life. And when we look at mindset, when we look at mental health, what are the things that potentially could be holding us back, right? And I'll always remember when Rob said to me on one of our podcasts, imposter syndrome probably means you're on the right track. However, imposter syndrome can also be extremely debilitating depending on the nature of imposter syndrome. And I believe, for sure, when I look back at both my bodybuilding journey, my podcast journey, absolutely, I've dealt with imposter syndrome a lot. You can imagine, reaching out to some of the guests, I'd be like, Jesus, I'm reaching out to someone that is, again, at the top of their game. Are they even going to message back? And people don't message back sometimes. It goes into their inbox in Instagram and it doesn't get read. But what encourages me to do that? And what I want to say about this sentiment is in regards to the learned behaviors, the clean slate, is that any time we have the choice to reroute our journey, and that goes into the bodybuilding space, right? We're often I feel like either we're led to believe by our coaches, we're led to believe by our peers, or we formulated within our own mind, you're not a proper bodybuilder unless you're doing preps and off seasons in cyclical phases. It has to be you're in prep or you're in off season, or obviously the reverse out on post show. But that's not true. It isn't, because I've done this myself. I've had periods of maintenance, I've had periods of time where I've had surgery, multiple injuries, etc., etc. So if I had to be in a prep, if I had to be in an off season, what would I do when I wasn't able to do that from something like surgery? Does that mean that I'm not a bodybuilder? Does it mean that I don't have the identity of being a bodybuilder anymore? No, it doesn't, because I can still stick to the fundamentals of bodybuilding. Now, if you arrive at a point where you're either in a prep or an off season and you need to step back, this is important, guys. This is your choice. If there's any reason why you need to step back and actually come to a point of perhaps maintenance or not labeling it as an off season or a prep, you're allowed to do that. And this is what I'll always say, fuck what everyone else is saying and doing. It doesn't matter. What matters is your own mental and physical health. And that's important, because that clean slate could actually feed into being able to start afresh from your bodybuilding journey when you've had a period of time of pulling back and coming out of the structured phases. It doesn't mean that you have to sack off everything from, what you've learned from bodybuilding. And I know multiple bodybuilders that have done extremely well in the sport, and then they've gone, Jesus, I need to step back here. I've got other focuses and other priorities in life. And that list goes on, right? It could be that you're pursuing business, it could be that you're having a child, like there's several things. There's nothing wrong with being able to go, whoa, okay, let's regroup here. What I will say with that is, and this is a personal thought process, this isn't going to apply to everyone, but what I do feel is, guys, that if you have been a bodybuilder, even if it's for one season, if you do completely come away from bodybuilding, you've maybe reached the leanest physique that you've ever seen in yourself before, and then you go in the opposite direction, I believe that that could essentially build a negative relationship with bodybuilding. I personally believe. Because again, you're reaching levels of leanness, you're stepping on stage, you're doing these things, and then suddenly it's like, I'm going to pursue something else. And if you sack off everything, that could leave you in, a bit of a negative space. That's not me saying stay lean, my thoughts here, guys. But that's a consideration to thinking about how you might feel in your own body. An extension of this, if you've been using even just health supplements, if you've been eating, the bodybuilding foods, as it were, if you're used to hitting a hydration target, if you're used to monitoring your sleep, all of these things, they are general well-being and health factors. Yes, we take it to extremes as bodybuilders, but if you are stepping away from pushing up or pulling down, if you're going into a bit of a maintenance period in life, well, let's think about this. If you were to remove all your supplements, sack off a hydration target, not worry about sleep, physiologically, you're also going to feel different. So when we combine the mental side and the physical side, that could leave you in a tricky spot. So that's just some considerations in regards to where you might want to head at times on your bodybuilding journey. When we relate this to the learned behaviors, if there's certain things that you do as a bodybuilder that you would like to change, that you would like to improve. So, whether that's your behaviors around food, training, whatever it might be, it might even stem into potentially PED use. All of these things, if you're noticing that actually you'd like to improve those things, how do we go about that? And we can absolutely strip it back to what is it that is essentially leading us to do these certain behaviors. And this feeds into the next sentiment from a very good friend of mine, Sonia Spil. She is, she's a legend. She absolutely is. I love podcasting with her. I also love the time that we talk outside of the podcast as friends. She's certainly someone that I've gelled with in the industry that is very much my vibe. Um, she's like a sister in regards to just our stories, our thought processes, everything we've sort of been through in life. We just hit it off from the word go. She says it straight, which again is something that I really do respect and rate because there's a lot of yes man in this space in life as well. There's a lot of people that just pacify you and hold back, and it's not cool for me. I don't like it. Hence, you can see my Christmas trousers there where I've just crossed my legs. If you're listening on YouTube, I don't want to be a normal, whatever the fuck normal is, a normal person. And Sonia brings that out in me, which I'm very grateful for. Again, finding your people. But Sonia actually said, and I've got my list here, I want to quote this to the letter, my people. So Sonia actually said on an episode where we were speaking about essentially food disorders that I'm an addict, accepting that means I can funnel my energies into something positive. And I remember when Sonia said this on the episode, she just said, I'm an addict. And I was like, whoa. And I've often referenced this with clients, with my friends, and people that would resonate with this. Because there is certainly thought processes to, I used to think like I've got an addictive personality. And what I believe is, guys, that most people probably do, because there is so many things that we can essentially funnel addiction into. There's things that we wouldn't even think about. So it could be that you spank coffee and you love coffee. It could be that I don't know, that there can be so many things outside of bodybuilding. It might be that you like a certain food or whatever it is. So when we look at the human behavior, the human psychology, Addiction, essentially, we're chasing dopamine and it makes us feel good. So we want that next hit, whatever that might be. We often relate addiction to, I would say, drugs, alcohol, nicotine, and maybe the food side of things. So that can be addictive traits, but there's so many other things as an extension of that. But what I like is that Sonia's past of anorexia and food disorders, she realized she was an addict in that regard. So, from coming through anorexia, there was an addiction to almost what we would label as sort of self-sabotage and not eating, leaning on laxatives and becoming addicted to that. Also, pain medication she spoke about, all of these things. And part of her healing, part of her way of dealing with this was going, I am an addict, but what I'm going to do is pour this into something positive. Now, she actually spoke about, she started to work a lot more. And then that almost got out of control because then her partner wouldn't see her. She'd work till late at night. She'd be checking her phone all the time, all of these things. And that was when, and her pivotal change here, which some of you might relate to, is she found her partner and she'd been married before, etc. And she actually wanted to spend life with him. And suddenly it was like, oh, okay. So I've got someone in my life that I love dearly. He loves me. We want to experience life. So maybe there's more to life than throwing myself into maybe work, whatever it may be. Maybe there's more to life than feeding an addiction. And maybe I can be addicted to healing and spending time with my other half. And what I like as well about this segment is that we can often chase labels, we can often chase identity. I'm a bodybuilder, I'm a competitive bodybuilder, I'm a mum, I'm a dad, whatever it may be. We have a label, we have a narrative. And sometimes that can be essentially clinged on to, right? So we see that someone else is X. I want to be X. Okay, so how do I become X? How do I do that? And we can start to find that narrative, that characteristic trait or traits in someone else that we want to be. This comes with success as well. Like when you see success, you think this is good. You can almost want to follow that success. So how do we then tie this into finding positivity in life, finding things that fill up our cup, that make us feel good, that make us laugh, that make us maybe revisit inner childhood sometimes. If you've come from a background of a hard upbringing, if you've forgotten how to experience joy, laugh, any of those things, I would say it's on us to find that. What are the things that bring us joy? And that's not always easy, guys. It's absolutely not. And I sit here talking about this from personal experience. It's not easy because I've been so used to seeking suffering. I'm going to play it straight. I have done multiple preps because I wanted to seek that, get off on it. How hard can I push? What can I do? Can I do more? Yes, I can. I want more. I want more pain. I want more suffering. I can do this. I'm a bodybuilder. I will do whatever it takes. And that became my narrative. So to break away from that was extremely hard because the label of, being a bodybuilder, being Sarah, the one that can prep to the nth degree, that for sure fueled me. Then when I started to work on myself, it was like, okay, so who am I? Who am I outside of being a bodybuilder? And as I say, that can be quite hard to experience joy because you almost feel bad. But what I would say is, and I will continue to post about this on my content, laughing, belly laughing when you're like, holy shit, I'm crying here, guys. I'm laughing so hard can come from the most simplest of things. It's often my mum and my stepdad because they are literally hilarious. But some of the things where and this, I've been doing this recently. I put music on when I food prep. An example like that, a really small example. I feel like there's an extra pep in my step. I'm doing my food prep and I look forward to it every night for my dinner. I'm like, oh, I get to do my food prep in a bit. So that's a little thing that it's like that feeds into your bodybuilding journey. And what that does is it funnels positivity from, chasing essentially almost these dopamine hits of being an addictive personality. Because absolutely, we all chase dopamine at times. So what I can do is, and this is what Sonia said, funnel it into something positive. So rather than, and if you've heard my story of the obsessive neuroticism around my food prep, so I always say this example, I cut a green bean in half to make sure it was the exact grams, so I could hit the exact macros day in, day out. My fiber, my macros, everything was bang on. That I was so tense. I was stressed. I was checking my Tupperwares. I was checking them again. I was weighing the food several times. No, enough was enough. Now, here, I do my food prep. If it's over by a gram on the green beans, that is okay. We don't want to take the piss here, guys. However, it's like, that's okay. Cool. I've got my music on. I'm vibing. I've got my Pepsi Max, of course. Pepsi Max is the one. And that turns it into something positive. And that's what I draw from that sentiment. Being able to essentially be aware enough of your traits and work out if they are serving you or if they're not. And that's important, guys. It really, really is. Because for us to be able to continue evolving as bodybuilders, ideally we want to seek enjoyment in this pursuit, which is important. Now, this leads me on to, and this is something that, it did hit me. And I've actually mentioned this recently on a post. The effects of extreme dieting with guest Jeff Black. And he said the decision to become a bodybuilder means you are never going to be happy with your body. And I'm challenging that in my own journey, or I have challenged that. When he said it, I was like, okay, I understand what you're saying. And when I did that podcast, when I sat there recording that podcast, I was not happy in my body ever. It was never enough, never enough. I always needed to be leaner. I always wanted to push more and more. In off season, I would smack talk myself day in, day out. If I caught myself in a mirror, if I was training at the gym, if I was being intimate with Matt, like I would be like, oh God, I've got body fat. I don't like this. Surely he wants me to be leaner. Surely I need to be leaner. This is uncomfortable. All of these things. And that would be going through my head rather than being present and, being intimate with Matt. I'd be thinking, oh God, I don't like this. And that extends into that's taking away fulfillment from my journey because it's also taken away from my true, authentic relationship with Matt, right? And that's an extension of how that domino effect can occur. So we can smack talk ourselves. We can then also withdraw from our partners. We can withdraw from going out in public, even. We can withdraw from wanting to go to the gym. We can withdraw from social occasions because we don't feel happy in our body. When this is in a prep context, you potentially will do more than you're meant to that your coach has set. You will constantly be looking and thinking, I'm never going to be ready. I don't look good. I don't even look like a bodybuilder. What's the fucking point? And all of these thought processes can go through, I'm sure, people listening through your minds. And it's very hard to come away from that. But what I found was, and this is something that I do hear other podcast guests reference, whatever these negative thought processes are, enough is enough. So you get to the point where you think, holy fucking shit, I'm meant to be enjoying this. Surely there should be a level of enjoyment from this pursuit. Surely I should be proud of my body, right? As bodybuilders, let's face it, we are literally day in, day out ticking boxes. And we're doing this to pour back into our own physique development journey and to celebrate bodybuilding. So then if we're constantly smack talking ourselves, why are we doing this? I understand, guys, a lot of preps that have been done by myself. I understand fully that we are going to be of a critical nature, right? Like we don't want to become complacent and we can't really as competitive bodybuilders. However, there, I believe, needs to be an element of self-reflection where we go inside here, we go into our mind and go, when did I last praise my physique? When did I last thank my body for what it does day in, day out? When did I last go, you look pretty fucking cool? When did I last accept a compliment? And that'll, I'm sure people listening, that'll hit. You know, you get a compliment, and I'm always like, "Thank you. Okay, let's talk about you. Let's get out of this scenario because it's not necessarily something that I wanna. I don't know. I'm just like, yeah, cool. I'm doing my thing. I'm doing this for me. However, I've got better at compliments, and that's something. That's a little tip. Get better at people praising you, and in turn, perhaps praise yourself when you're doing the gym, when you're putting clothes on. I always say, and I always say this, guys. Wear clothes that fit you, that you feel comfortable in, that actually make you feel good. Rather than, for me, I wouldn't try and squeeze into a smaller sports bra and a pair of shorts when I'm at the height of off season if it makes me feel really uncomfortable. What's the point? I don't need to wear anything to satisfy anyone else. I will wear what I want to wear. I've even wore these Christmas trousers, Christmas pajama bottoms to the gym because I don't give a fuck. If I'm comfortable in my session, that's going to make my session better. I do not want to be using kit and thinking, oh God, is someone looking at my hamstrings? Oh, I'm pushing in off season. Are they going to be thinking things? I don't want any of that. I don't need any of that negative noise. And that's a reminder to you guys to actually think about the bigger picture here. So if there is a lot of negative self-talk, if there is this feeling of, you know, critique that's crippling you, let's try and think about what our bodies are actually doing, and could we look at praising ourselves? Could we look at enjoying this a little bit more? This also transpires into where I spoke about being intimate with your partner. How are they making you feel? Are you able to maybe talk to them? Because I've absolutely spoken to Matt about it. And an ironic thing is that he actually prefers me with more body fat, with more muscle in a growth phase. And I actually touched on this with Aaron 4 weeks to the beach on Instagram. We spoke about this. I am gonna give a sentiment from him, but it's slightly different. And he said, I don't feel sexually attracted to people when they're stage lean or anywhere near that. It is not a vibe. From a male standpoint, it's like I want to have some body fat, I want to have some shape. And that was again, and I would always thank Aaron for this. That was something that stuck in my mind in my narrative of my relationship. And that's who I am outside of being a bodybuilder, right? I want to feel sexy. I want to feel curves. I want to feel good. And that is really, really nice to challenge the narrative. Now, also on that episode, which was I want to stay lean all year round, he said I would never compete as a bodybuilder, but I have huge respect for people that do. Now, what does this mean? What does this actually look like when we think about people that don't want to compete, that don't want to be bodybuilders? Well, what it looks like is, guys, that this is our personal decision. This is our choice to do it. Other people around us don't need to do it, but this sentiment in itself shows me that Aram has respect for what we do. So if he was around bodybuilders, he'd be like, okay, I've got respect for what you do, but it's not something I want to do myself. He doesn't want to go into the extremities of bodybuilding. He doesn't want to. And let's face it, guys, when we think about this, the extreme nature of being a competitive bodybuilder, it is not healthy. And when you actually think about that, right, that sentiment in itself. So we're doing this, we're pushing to, lean conditions, we're pushing up in off season, both hold extreme natures. Okay, so we're doing something that's detrimental to our health. So why do other people need to do that? And what this normally comes from is you want people to do it so they understand what you're doing, they understand your choice. But guys, no one will understand what it feels like to be stage lean unless they've been there themselves. No one will understand the mindset fuckery that comes from pushing up in off season. No one will understand what we do as bodybuilders if they haven't done it themselves. I wouldn't understand what it takes for someone to, I don't know, let's talk about technology. For someone to rebuild a whole computer from scratch or build a computer from scratch. I wouldn't understand what goes into that, and I'm sure it's very intensive for the mind. But they wouldn't understand unless they've done a prep what it takes to get to stage lean. And there's different examples that I'll remind you of in the bodybuilding space, where there's a reason why some people will do one prep and then not do it again. There's a reason why people will get partway through a prep and pull out because it's bloody hard work. There's a reason why people won't do an off season because it's bloody hard work. So when we look at this, what I would say is feel the gratitude that you're able to do this. And that's not just from a physical standpoint, guys, that's from a mindset standpoint. What is it that takes us to getting lean, to pushing up? It's you, it's your mind. The coach guides you, but it's you that does it. So use that as a flex, right? You don't need anyone else to do it. We want to be this small percentage of people in the world. We want to be unique. We want to be different. We want to be weird and wonderful, right? I'm sure you're with me when you're listening to this. It's a flex. I don't need the Tesco shop cashier to know what I'm going through when I'm in a prep. I don't need people to be going, "You're doing really well. You're doing really well. Keep going." I don't need that. I'll always remember in my last prep, my coach said to me, it was about 3 weeks out, "How are you, Sarah?" And I was like, "All good." And he said, "No, Sarah, how are you?" And I said, "I am fucked. I'm not good." And then we had a conversation about it. But I didn't need him to go, "Well done, keep going. You've got this." I didn't need that, right? Because if that's based on me going, "I'm fucked," I don't want that. I don't want pity. I don't need the intrinsic motivation of me to do what I do. That's fueled by me. That's me who does it. Yes, as I say, the coach outlines a plan, but it's me that does it. And as I say, guys, use that as a flex. Use it as a flex because it's important. And when we are going through these multiple phases, good friend of mine, Paul O'Need, came on the podcast and he's been on multiple times now. And what a guy is what I'm going to say. I've got a lot of respect and loyalty to Paul since we first spoke. He's been no end of inspiration to me as a coach and as a person. He's just an all-round legend. He really, really is. And the last pod we did, he was 5 weeks out from a bodybuilding competition. And he said on that podcast, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. The decision of who you want to become in a bodybuilding prep is a choice. And this is going to cover all phases, guys. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? Because feeding that into what I was just talking about, are you someone that needs people to tell you day in, day out how well you're doing? Otherwise, you're not going to do it. Do you need to post on Instagram every 5 minutes to facilitate you doing it? Do you need other people to motivate you to do it? Well, guess what, guys? Those people aren't there when you're doing 2 hours on the step machine. Those people aren't there when you got to get up at 4:30 in the morning to do your thing. Those people aren't there when you're thinking, "Oh, I feel quite uncomfortable in off season." Those people aren't there when you are physiologically not okay in a prep. But who do you want to become? And that being a choice. What a sentiment. It's huge. It's huge. Because do you want to be a all-round dickhead because you're in a prep? Maybe you do. Maybe you don't mind. But I just don't feel like it's something that we should look to facilitate. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably going to be someone that is part of my narrative. You're going to be listening because you like listening to me and the guests, and you're going to understand from me that yes, at the depths of prep, Paul was 5 weeks out on this podcast. You're feeling it, guys. You are feeling it. However, do you need to take that out on anyone else? But also, let's draw this back to, do you need to be negative in your own mind? Because if you're constantly negative and resenting this pursuit, why are you doing it? Like, does that feed you? Maybe it does. Maybe there's elements of that being a good thing for you. But if we're constantly detrimental to ourselves in our own mind or allowing other people to be detrimental towards us, are we becoming the best version of ourselves? Is the stage enough for you to do what you do on a daily basis? Is the stage enough when you go through the multiple phases? Because when we do an off season, it's for the stage, right? We're building muscle to improve our physique next time we step on stage. That's the whole point. If we're in here, twisted, resentful, hating bodybuilding, that's also not going to serve our physique. It's not going to serve our relationships. It's not going to serve our longevity of life. It's absolutely not. And what I love about this sentiment is it also explores the people that are around you, your close circle, your people, your acquaintances who you follow on Instagram, all of those things. And Anastasia came on not long ago and she said on the podcast, I don't have anybody in my life that I allow to impact me in a negative way. I do not give anyone that power. And wow, what a vibe. What a vibe. Because I mean, she is literally the queen of this. She's just like, no, no, I don't allow that. I don't allow people in that are going to affect me like that. Again, it's a choice because who we want to become can also transpire into the people around us and what people might say. So if you face a lot of negativity, whether that's in real life or on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever social media platform, if you are consuming a lot of negativity in whichever way that is that going to feed you in a positive way? Well, we could absolutely hazard a guess no. What do we do about that? We have a choice here, guys. Yes, it's not always easy to break away from relationships just like that. For sure, it's not. I understand that. But if we are consuming negativity on social media, if we're feeding the subconscious with that, if we're feeding the algorithm with that, if we're having negative comments and lashing back at these people, if we have got negative people in our lives, is that going to transpire into us maybe feeling more negative about ourselves, about life in itself? Probably that's going to have an impact. We can almost say yes, right? And it's important to stock take, and this is what I take from any of these types of conversations to stock tape and go for a moment. Okay, let's look around me. What's my environment? Who are the people I speak to? What do I consume? Do I want to change that? What is serving me? What you've also got to realize, going back to the addictive nature, we can absolutely get addicted to negativity. We can actually seek it out. And it's not a nice space to be when you realize you've done it for a multitude of months, years, however long that is. Because it feeds this almost demon within you to be negative yourself because that becomes your normal. What I would say with this is ask yourself, do you want to be a negative person? Do you want to consume this? And that's not me saying it's far from it that you should be positive all the time because it's just not, in my experience, it's not possible to always just feel so positive. What it does is it allows you to go, how do I feel? Who do I want to become? Can I see more from negative scenarios to make it more of a positive nature? Can I seek more light? Can I seek challenges that allow me to then go, okay, shit has hit the fan. I got this. I got this. So I'm going to sort this out. Because really, and this is an analogy I've sort of built up in my own mind recently. Life's a bit of a game, guys. We're almost in this game where it's like we're all dots on this place we call Earth in this world. There's billions of people in the world. And really, what's the worst that can happen a lot of the time? And sometimes we just need to go, okay, I probably don't need to get caught up on X, Y, or Z. It's not that deep. I can absolutely get through this. And it's important to sometimes go, actually, when it comes to my circle, when it comes to people around me, who are those people? Now, when we do reach times of big challenges in life, things that do throw us off and cause us the the painful nature of certain scenarios that may or may not be with people involved as well. What is it that allows us to get through these challenges other than I got this? I've got this, I'm going to push through. And what I'm going to draw this into is a sentiment from Pat Warner. Again, a very good friend that I met at the start of my bodybuilding journey. Absolute G, and he is an OG of the bodybuilding world. And he said, I owe it to the industry to turn around and say, I do cry sometimes. Now, this in itself, when we think about this, we've got a man that's bodybuilded for a multitude of years. He's at the top of his, you know, game when he was competing. He's an OG of the UK bodybuilding scene. He stepped on stage with some of the, people that we could call idols, icons in the space. It, what a guy! What a guy! And he met a challenge in his life where essentially he died for a short space of time. He got brought back round after being in a coma, etc. And what he realized is that there was a lot of times where he was very, very low and he cried. He cried. Listening to his story on the podcast really did hit for me. We're seeing someone that's been a bodybuilder, a successful bodybuilder for a multitude of years, who has got to the point where he couldn't go out the house, anxieties, heart issues, monitoring his heart rate all the time, doing things to be okay. Someone who is, as I say, excelled as a bodybuilder and then is imprisoned by his own home that leads into anxieties and mental health struggles. This, guys, as well, is a reminder. Enjoy, enjoy your bodybuilding. Because one day, we're all going to get older. One day, it might be taken from you. And I've had a multitude of guests and myself where life-changing things have occurred. And let me tell you, when bodybuilding is taken away from you, if you're anything like me, that fucking hurts. It really hurts, and we are tested beyond belief. But it's something I took from Pat, and it's something that I've said for, well, most of my life. I say this to my clients, I say this to my friends. Cry. Allow yourself to feel. Because I personally believe the epiphanies I've had along my journey, dealing with my food behaviors, dealing with my relationship with food, dealing with my own body image and my relationship with my body. Any of these things, when I've had these epiphanies, I have cried like a fucking baby. Cried, cried, cried. And a painful, like, fuck, I'm letting out this demon. And it's something I've experienced when I lost my granddad, pivotal times in my life where I've cried and I've cried and I've cried, and that's come from the soul. I'm tanked, I'm on the floor, I'm crying, I can't stop, I don't know what to do. It's so much pain, so much pain, but it allows me to feel. And in my personal experience, and this won't be for everyone, but being able to embrace emotions, let yourself fucking cry. Let it out. Let that demon out. Feel the emotion. Let it out and allow yourself to either grieve a past you, grieve something that you want to let go of, grieve that you're dealing with a challenging time and things have changed and the dynamic has changed in your life. And that's inspirational for people. It's inspirational for myself, especially when, Pat said this. He's someone that I look up to in the industry. As I say, he's one of the first people I met at my first bodybuilding show. I was there at registration, absolutely shitting myself, and Pat was there with a smile, and he was like, "Welcome to the show." And I was like, "Wow, who is this beacon of light and hope?" Then you think about this 12 or so years on when we did the podcast, and I see someone who is saying, "I do cry sometimes, and I owe it to the industry to say that." Wow, and this is where I say positive role models and influencers in the space, that is important because he's someone I remembered for my whole bodybuilding journey. Pat played a part in me being where I am today. He absolutely did. And I'm grateful for that. And this is also something I often reference. Be grateful for those that believe in you and that allow you to push into places that you didn't know you were even possible. Remember those people. And that's personally for me, I just believe that if you're so self-centered and you don't give a shit about anyone else, I feel like for me it would bite me in the arse one day with karma coming knocking at my door. but I also feel like it's important when people go out their way to help you, when people go out their way to do something for you, and like I say, if they believe in you, be grateful for that and maybe tell them. Maybe this is your reminder, and I said this on the conversation I had last week, to get in touch with someone that you haven't spoke to for a while and go, do you know what? Thanks for believing in me. Thanks for pushing me, or thanks for having an impact on my day, which is what Pat did at my first show. And when I talk about the demons I let out, the past, and coming forward with dealing with things, Sarah came on the podcast, Sarah Bradley, and she said there are things in your past that you don't even think could be affecting you, but they are. And that is such a strong statement because it's not easy to deal with things that might be holding you back from your past. Because for sure, this is why I label them as almost demons, because it's like, you know, they're in there and they're holding us back. They're demons and they're like, how can I thrive here? How can I thrive here? How can I essentially stay in that subconscious and how can I rear up? How can I affect you? How can I have a negative impact on how you feel about yourself? How can I hold you back from your ambitions? How can I make you question yourself? And Sarah spoke a lot about therapy with this. She spoke about essentially being able to utilize a therapist to move forward and also be cautious of who she has around in a circle and what she does as a bodybuilder, how much she shares on social media, which is also super important. And I feel like the therapy and the therapist side of things is also important. Something I speak about a lot with different guests and not giving up on if you don't find a therapist straight away, if there's more to it and you need to look and try again, that's important because it could be your bridging of the gap to dealing with something. Because I've had a lot of therapists, I've done a lot of work on myself, but to be able to get to the point where I can actually deal with these things myself, like the body image, that wasn't with a therapist, that wasn't with anyone. That was me working on that myself. To get there, I have the gift of speaking to guests on the podcast. I speak to doctors, I speak to food disorder specialists, I speak to lots of people. So I'm gaining insight myself. But that in turn is almost like a therapy because I'm exploring, I'll ask questions that sometimes I don't know are helping me. So actually, having these positive role models, having a therapist, having someone you can talk to is a very, very good thing. It's something that I do with my coaching clients. If they are willing to go deep and dark from a mindset standpoint, we do. Not every one of my clients does. Some of my clients are like, look, I just need a plan. I want to crack on. And I respect that. However, a lot of my clients gravitate towards me because they want to evolve as a human more than just a bodybuilder. They want to learn true bodybuilding, but they also want to go on the mindset evolution journey with me. They want to get deep and dark, and I'm fucking here for it. I'm not a qualified therapist, but I absolutely have it within my remit to help people work on their mindset. And I'm here for it. I absolutely am. And someone that will talk about therapy and her own journey is Romana. You know, a friend of the podcast, as Mr. Off labeled her, and Romana, what a fucking G. It's also her birthday today, so happy birthday to Romana. She is 40, which is, so fucking cool that she's someone that pours so much into the podcast. I absolutely love it because she's just a phenomenal human, and we absolutely share a passion to empower and educate our community. And Romana, when she came on at the start, she's someone I reached out to and I thought, will she reply? This person seems this goddess of the bodybuilding space, and we've obviously formulated our friendship. But she said multiple times, and one sentiment that stuck out: when I stepped on the Olympia stage, I was at the height of PTSD, and it's a blur. I'd also like to tie this into Nathan Styles, who came on the podcast. Big Nath Styles. If I could give one bit of advice, it would be to be more present on your bodybuilding journey. So both of those sentiments are very, very true to if you are dealing with something as a bodybuilder, it's going to be sometimes hard to be solely present on the journey. So in Romana's example, PTSD. But what she's found is bodybuilding has helped give her that purpose to come through the PTSD, to pursue that. But it got to the point at the Olympia when it was a blur. It was, she was not in a good spot. And that took away from the Olympia experience. But now she's realized that she wants to be more present as a bodybuilder. We speak about it, we voice note every day. We speak about being present. I actually voice noted Romana the other day and I was voice noting her and I said, right now I'm voice noting you. I'm doing something that feels good. You're my person. I'm speaking to you. We're sharing personal anecdote. I'm looking up. I can see color in the trees. I can see my feet walking. I'm grateful to walk. And I mean that because learning to walk again last year, that gave the gratefulness I needed, guys. And then I said to her, I will walk home, finish the voice note, open the front door, finish the voice note, come in. Okay, what am I doing next? And it was actually going to be some food prep. So I was like, okay, so I take my jumper off, take my shoes off, and then I go in, put my music on for my food prep. I do my food prep. I look at the fresh produce. I feel grateful to have this food and I'm present with every single thing I do. And she was like, whoa, I love how you've explained that. That's what I want to do more of because she's been listening to podcasts of that nature as well. So when we think about what Nathan said, it's like he's competed for a multitude of years. And if he could turn back time, he would be more present in the bodybuilding journey. And that's in all phases. And that's important. That's a reminder to all of you guys because it goes quick. I can't believe it's been over 13 years of being a bodybuilder. I don't feel like I'm 36. I'm going to be 40 one day, guys. 40. And it's wild. It's wild because it does go quick. It really, really does. And this is the thing with everything that we're doing. It's like if we're not allowing some level of essentially present nature with what we're doing and enjoying it, is is it the right choice for us? Like, is this what we want to be doing? Is it truly our passion? Is it truly worth doing what we're doing? Because we need to think about this, right? When we're doing what we're doing, and this transpires into training, nutrition, posing, all of the things, is it really worth it? And I remember saying this to a friend not long ago. If I ended up on my deathbed tomorrow, and I know this is a big statement, guys, but it's true. If I was on my deathbed tomorrow and the doctor said, would you change your week? Like, would you have really wanted to hit a step target and train X amount of times and go to bed at a certain time and do food prep? In my heart of hearts, my answer is I wouldn't change a thing because bodybuilding is my beat in my heart, like you guys are. It's my life and it's my choice, and I absolutely fucking love to the death of it. I absolutely do. I would actually quote this now and give a shout out to, it's just come to my mind, Gemma, who listens to the podcast. What a G she is. And she did essentially a review on podcast, and she said, "What is not to love? If you love bodybuilding, you'll love this podcast. Sarah keeps it real in every episode. This podcast got me through my first prep and has pointed me in the direction to follow some awesome and inspiring people on socials. You learn and connect with the episodes, and every week I look forward to the next one. Sarah's passion for the sport shines in every single episode she does, and I'm so grateful that she is sharing this with all of us. Phenomenal work." And it's true. Thank you, Gemma, for that because being seen in that way is important. But it is. I wouldn't change that. I fucking love all of it. All of it. Yes, guys, it's fucking hard work. It is. But what else would I be doing? I've said this before. Now, what I'm going to also tie this into is training intensity, what we do from a training standpoint as bodybuilders. So, again, when training is hard, could we resent it? Of course we could. Could we duck out on the intensity? Of course we could. Could we not push ourselves? Of course we could. Not bother, right? We can just train. We can do that. And there's a couple of sentiments that I want to share. Now, what's funny is, guys, both of these people are my besties. So, Scott Stevenson, Scott, I fucking love you. You don't know progressive overload was the episode, and he said, training until you bleed, that's not suffering, that's something that you want to do. Fucking love that guy. What a person. He is literally, yeah, he is an inspiration to me beyond words. Wendy is also my bestie, and she said, and I love this from Wendy. I love Wendy's aura. She is labeled the queen for a reason. Everybody thinks they train hard until they actually train hard. Now, both Scott and Wendy, they are my besties, but they are also huge inspirations to me. And I actually voice noted Wendy the other day and I said, she said, Bestie, just to let you know, I think of you every day. And I said to Wendy, I was like, I absolutely think about you every single fucking day. And I referenced, even if it's when I'm getting the last rep in training, I'm like, Wendy will be fucking here for this, seeing me making noises and fucking failing in the gym. And what a sentiment for training. Now, this also comes from positive role models in your life. Who are you learning from? And is training, do you want to leave the gym and think, I absolutely could have done more here? But have you trained hard before? Have you been able to understand and learn the discipline of training and be able to push yourself? Because I look around the gym all the time, guys, and I think, fuck me, you've got about 20 reps in reserve here. You're here doing selfies and whatever else, chatting. Imagine the progress you could get from your physique. Now, that's not me saying people want to do that. Maybe they don't, but I can't help but think, oh, your potential is there. If only you could train hard. And it's got to come from within, even if you have the positive role models. But what I would say is put yourself in scenarios where you're able to see people train hard. Maybe you can train with other people. Maybe you can explore that. And Beck, who listened to my conversation I had in the week, and she makes me die. What a great gal. Love her to bits. She's a podcast listener, and she said, "I think I want to be humbled in training at some point." And that's what I want to hear, guys. That's what I want to hear because could you get 1%, 5%, 10% more from your physique? Could that equate over the years to more and more and more? Could you see more from your physique? Absolutely, you could. Can you train for that? That's on you. That is on you. A lot of us are online coached, so we maybe don't get the chance to be around our coach. But this is where we can send training footage. We can maybe make a trip to meet our coach. We can maybe find people in the space that inspire us, that push us forward. And again, that's important, right? To find people that fuel us. And this is the next sentiment. It's funny in some respects. It's Tony Huge. What a fucking guy. But it is also it's ruthless, but it's true. And he said on a podcast we did, and it is true, guys. The amount of PD use and steroid use that I see from people that don't even bodybuild is wild. However, the sentiment, imagine taking huge amounts of steroids and not even looking like you lift. I mean, that's got to be your fucking worst nightmare, right? And he said this because I said, what's the worst thing that you've come across with steroid use? Now, he said a number of things, and this was on a podcast, Extreme Steroid Use. But that was one of the things, and I was like, that is so true. Because you're actually taking compounds, and because you're not bodybuilding, you're just taking steroids, you don't even look like you lift. And that sentiment in itself is huge if you're going down the PD route or people, and I'm sure most of you listening or a lot of you listening will go, there's that idiot at the gym that takes a load of gear and don't even fucking train properly. Now, not only are steroids aren't good, guys, the detrimental effects that can occur from a physiological standpoint and, mentally, it's not, something to fuck around with. That's a part of why I do the podcast. But that in itself is a sentiment. It's also a sentiment into when you talk about huge amounts of steroid use. Dynamite, my absolute G. So Dynamite D, David, who's been on the podcast multiple times, and he is back very soon, which I'm very excited about. He came on the podcast and we were talking about virilization. We were talking about masculinization for female bodybuilders. Extremely valuable podcast, guys. If you haven't listened to it, get yourself on that. It's in the earlier days, but it's a very, very good episode. It was very well downloaded. I really do appreciate David because he is an ultimate G. Now, he said, let me find it. Got to find it, guys. So he said, you know me, I want to, when I say words, I got to quote it exact, guys. A start dose for Anavar could be 2.5 milligrams daily. It blows my mind when people start at 25. And I've had I've had multiple consults. I've had clients, multiple clients, not just one, that have been put on a start dose of 20 or 25 milligrams per day of Anavar. And that is fucking wild when you could start at potentially 2.5. Now, my whole shtick with this is get the most from the least. So if you start on a high dose, where do you go for a start? Where's the titration up? Where's the use of anabolic steroids over time? Now, I get, guys, and I understand this. Potentially, you get in the game, you want to just get stuck in, you go down the assisted route, you do take a high amount of compounds, and that's what you want to do. I'm not smacking that. But in my experience, what I'm talking about is people that are just getting into bodybuilding, they haven't even done a prep. They don't even know if they like bodybuilding. They haven't done an off season. They're just like, I want to start a prep. And they're put on a high amount of gear from the word go. Now, not only does that come with the physiological and physical effects, there's things that people don't even know about with side effects. And this could be organ damage. This can be hair growth. This can be your voice changing. This can be, clit enlargement. This can be a multitude of things, hair growth, etc. How do you know until those things occur if you're okay with it for a start? And I will be doing a conversation I had talking about this. But also, you're essentially taking advice from a coach to do these things. And do you know the bigger picture? And this is why, a podcast like that, listen to it because it's very, very beneficial. But this is why a statement like this from someone like David is also huge because it's like, oh, okay, so if you're listening and you started on 20 or 25, maybe it gives you a moment to think about this. And I'm going to tie this into two coaching statements in the space. So one from Austin, who is my mentor, and again, a gem in our industry. Now he said when he came on a podcast, I asked him, Austin, how do people sleep at night? How do coaches sleep at night that, you know, put people in this scenario that I've just spoken about? People that are, abusive to their clients, coaches that are really fucking horrible, coaches that take people into medical conditions, all of these things that we hear in the space. And he said, coaches that operate with a lack of care and dignity sleep just fine at night. And I was like, shit. And I've mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast because I'm like, whoa, yep, that makes sense. Because they don't care, right? They don't care about that. They care about the money, the paycheck, and a transformation. And if you see, a load of transformations on someone's page, maybe you go, I would like a transformation. I will hire that coach. What I will say in the respect of this is, guys, have consultations, have multiple conversations, and if anything comes up that you're not comfortable with, if something is, and I've spoken about this on the podcast, if something is happening that is not right, remember to reach out to someone, speak to someone in your support network, because the thing is with this, it's very dangerous because you don't know anything else. If you're just getting into bodybuilding, how coaches operate, you might have a coach that tells you to do X, Y, and Z, and maybe you think that's normal. And I think that's more common than we would essentially like to believe. And it is, because how do you know? The coach is saying this is what's required from a prep. If you want to be successful, and this is what one of my clients got told by a previous coach who was put on 25 milligrams per day of Anima, if you want to be competitive, you've got to take gear. And that is not okay. That is not okay because it's pressurizing someone into something, it's pigeonholing them, and they want to be a bodybuilder. Yes, I know you're taking the compound. I understand that, and it's a choice. However, this fucked up shit that goes on in our industry is wild, and this is why I want to talk about it. So again, Austin is someone to learn from. On the caveat to this, we have very good coaches in this space. One of those coaches is Nick Bagley, who is someone that's been on the podcast multiple times as well. And he said, the more time I have coaching an individual, the more I can learn what works and how their body responds. And I really like that because it's true. The longer we get the opportunity to work with someone, the more we can learn their bodies as a coach, we can also learn how they tick. This also feeds into the multiple phases that we take you guys through as coaches because we can learn season to season. And something that can be quite hard as a bodybuilder is when you are embarking on the journey, if you have expectations of winning your first show or, etc., etc., maybe that comes with pressures to do that. We as coaches we take time to learn your bodies and your mind for a reason because we want to get the best from you. We want to be able to, essentially keep unlocking new potential for your physique and your mindset. So staying with it, finding a coach at first, as I've already spoken about, that is you gel with. Don't just, I don't believe, unless you catch that vibe straight away, which I have with multiple clients myself. Have multiple consultations. Something I say to people on a consult, I'm like, have you consulted with anyone else? Because I don't want anyone to start coaching with me and think, I could have had other consults. I'd rather them do that. I'm not in it for the money. I really am not, guys, and I mean that. I always say this, I've got to pay bills, but that's not what drives me as a coach. And it's not what drives Nick. Nick is, he will blow up. I'll say it here and now. And I said that on our Instagram post because the passion that comes from Nick is it's obvious, guys. And this is why if you were, if you're coaching with someone of this nature, if you're coaching with someone like Gemma said about me with my passion for bodybuilding, if you pick up the passion, it's hard to beat that, right? It really, really is. It truly, truly is. And it's something that then feeds into your bodybuilding, who you are as a bodybuilder, and also the expectations of what you want to achieve in the sport. And Tim, again, a very good friend, Tim Hunt, he said on one of our podcasts, it's the only way to change the judge's mind is to improve and come back stronger. Now, that's something that stuck with me because it couldn't be truer. It literally couldn't. But this also ties into your expectations and also how your coach is with you around your shows, around what you're doing, around your placings. And I say this to all my clients, even if you win, we want to know feedback because we want to get better, we want to improve. We always do. I've only had one of the shows that I won where they said just stay the same. And I was like, what do you mean? Of course I can get better. Every other show that I've won, they've given me feedback to get even better. And that's important. That's what this is about. It's about you getting better every time you step on stage, right? And we can forget that. We absolutely can. Would this tie into wanting to do more PDs, wanting to do more extreme things? For sure it could. And this is why having a coach that cares about you, that operates with ethics is important. And Dan, Romana's other half, Dan Bastic, he said this when we're talking about PEDs, when we spoke about how far a competitive bodybuilder is willing to go. He said, each new compound you introduce is a gateway to the next PED you will consider. And I can absolutely attest to that, guys. I for sure can. Because when we look at PED use, I often label this as chasing the dragon. When you go down the assisted route, for me, even putting test in, fem test, my test was bottomed out from doing this naturally for so many years. I felt so much better already. Then it's growth hormone. Wow, the impact on sleep and recovery. Then it's anabolics. Whoa, fuck me. When you first use anabolics, the feeling you can get, not everyone does, you feel invincible. Could that make me want to extend my cycles and exposures a bit more? For sure it could. Could my physique progress being amplified by PEDs make me want to do more? Yes, it could. This ties into essentially getting a coach that is on board with you to listen to what your what your risk versus reward is and to help you formulate that. This also ties into longevity of life and what that looks like moving forward, but it also ties into you as a person and your responsibilities in life, who you are, who this who you are and who you could become with PEDs. And Matt, my other half, came in when we did the trend tales and he spoke about trend use. Now, this isn't ordinarily something we're going to talk about in the female realm. However, there are females that use it. And he said it almost felt like there was another version of me living in my head. It was almost an emotional withdrawal from a lack of feeling. And I live with Matt, and I saw this happening. If you haven't listened to the Trend Tales, have a listen. That was a wild episode. 4 hours, guys. 4 hours of 11 guests sharing their anecdote with Trent. And he pulled the trend when he started to realize this was happening. And this is the thing that people don't talk about, the psychological effects from PED use that aren't a joke. They are real. They're things that happen that you don't even really realize they're happening unless perhaps you've got a partner like me that can help thought provoke. But people come off something like Tren and they go, fucking hell, that was wild. That wasn't even me. And this does happen. That's why I did that episode sharing a multitude of guests. This can happen with even anabolic use. I've spoken about my own anabolic use. My sex drive goes up, my training performance goes up if I'm in an off season utilizing anabolics. My well-being goes up. My, and this is the thing, my chasing of the dragon is like, oh, and I have to be strict with myself to go, no, you do 2 to 3 exposures a year of 8 weeks. That's your cap. I already have some of the effects of anabolic use. I have an enlarged clit. I do have more hair growth in certain areas. My voice is a touch deeper, although it's quite deep anyway. I also need to be aware of when I'm using anabolics, my training performance skyrockets. It absolutely does. What I need to be aware of is the strain on my body whilst doing this. And something that resonates with this is when Stan Efferding came on the podcast and he said, show me someone who's never been injured, and I'll show you someone that's never won anything. Now, that's a sentiment in itself, for sure it is, because, of course, we all get a lot of injuries. We absolutely do. Things happen as bodybuilders, and it's like, holy shit, I've got another injury. What do I do now? And I sit here with, at the moment, three niggles, should we say? One of them was from falling down some stairs, so that wasn't bodybuilding related. However, when we look at the things that can occur in this space, I've had multiple injuries and I've won multiple shows, so it does correlate. But I want to tie this into when we are training hard, and that's with or without anabolics, we want to take consideration to the recovery aspect and being able to be mindful around that. Being able to, if you are on anabolics, be mindful around the tendons and ligaments working so much more when you are pushing more load. But also, if you're up in your training intensity, and that could be naturally, we're putting ourselves under more stress. So, what do we have in place for recovery? Now, that's not just going in a sauna for 5 minutes a week. This is bigger things. There's a multifaceted picture here. What are your nutrition preferences and the sources that make up your diet? Are you doing things like having massage? Are you doing things like maybe, and I do yoga every day, and I'm not saying you should do that, but yoga, mobility. Are you doing some, readiness before the gym? Those types of things. And that's something I could talk about, for quite some time. But it's also when you are injured, and this is hard. It absolutely is. I'm not saying it's easy, but respecting the injury, or if you've had surgery, or if you have a condition, anything like that, and adapting and essentially learning from that, not trying to just make it worse. Now, adaptation is going to be personal to you. So I would say, of course, having a coach that can help you with this in this time, not just pushing through injuries, trying to be a bit more vigilant. And as I say, respecting your bodies for what they do. But that sentiment in itself, I'm going to say for my own journey, it is pretty true. But I'm not promoting injuries, guys. I'm not promoting injuries. And that was the last sentiment. Now, as you can see, guys, wow, we're already over an hour of just talking through. There's 22 episode sentiments there out of a lot of episodes, guys, a lot of episodes. And what an opportunity. Now, as I said at the start, I want to essentially wrap up with being able to talk about what it takes to start a podcast and essentially my methods of making a successful podcast. The first thing I say to every single person that wants to start a podcast is, and I believe I'm one of the only podcasts in the UK in the bodybuilding space that has stuck to this. Choose the day you're going to release your episodes and do it every fucking week. Because what we've got to remember in the podcast world is that the way the brain works, and this ties into what Gemma said as well. I turn up and I show up with an episode every single week at 6 a.m. on a Monday. I also obviously do my bonus episodes. This used to be 5 p.m. on a Monday and I changed it to 6 a.m. Now that enables people, my podcast listeners, you guys, to know that every Monday I will release an episode. Now that has been done. I've been on my hospital bed. I've been grieving by losing people in my life through death. I've been severely injured. I've been highly medicated off the back of surgery. I've been through some terrible things whilst hosting this podcast, and not once have I not delivered an episode on a Monday. Not once. And I'm going to feel very proud about that every single day. And I do feel very proud about that. But that is consistency. Now, that's what we need as bodybuilders as well. So that's my first bit of advice. Now, when it comes to being a successful podcast, I believe from my experience that we need to look at if it was something like bodybuilding, it's very niche, you know. We essentially eat, sleep, train, repeat. And that's, for sure, a sentiment that we could look at, right? However, I've found a niche or niches within this. So this is what I would, explore yourself. Because I've had to look at the bigger picture here of how can I talk about bodybuilding for years and years and years and years and years. My intention is to continue doing this for a multitude of years. And this is important. And this is really, really important. How do we look at niches within a niche? So for me, it's female bodybuilding. It's talking about PD use for females and males. It's talking about mindset. It's talking about food disorder. Like there's so many things and almost like the bodybuilding's in the middle, but what are the topics that can branch out into for me to talk about? Now that requires me to think outside the box on a daily basis. I think about and talk about the podcast every single day. Hands down, every single day. On top of this, every week, and yes, I have gained clients through the podcast, so that does bring revenue, but that is not my motivation. I spend, I would say, all in all, around 80 hours a week on the podcast. I do all of the artwork, I reach out to guests, I make the descriptions, I record the podcast, I edit the podcast, I make the reels, I make the content, I do all of that. So we have then a decision. You could absolutely outsource that, but you would need financial backing to do that. It also costs money to get artwork initially for me. So it was around £600 to get my logo and essentially my intro and outro for the YouTube videos. So that's an outlay as well. What I will say is this is a passion project, very much like bodybuilding. Yes, we can earn money through bodybuilding at certain points if we, climb the ranks, if we get sponsorships, etc. However, more than likely you're going to be paying out for your bodybuilding. So is it worth the investment of your time and can you keep it up is important. Now, for me, when I'm looking at guests, I have a certain format and a certain vibe I'm looking for. There's a reason why I don't have dickheads on the podcast because it's not what I want to do. I don't want to bring people into this space, into our safe space that are not on my frequency, on my vibe. So that creates time of vetting people, that creates time of looking at their content, understanding other people that have worked with the people that I asked to come on, being able to understand what the vibe is I'm looking for. And essentially, what we also need to think about from a time standpoint is when I get guests, as an example, internationally, there's time zones. I've done podcasts on my day off, my one day off a week at 9 p.m. at night, because that's the only time the podcast guests can do. And they are worth it because I bring them to your ears. So when we're looking at from a time scheduling standpoint, that is also a consideration. What I will say to end this episode is that nothing beats passion. I said this at the start. If you have a dream, pour your fucking life into it. When you face conflict, when you face challenges, don't give up on yourself. Find something that gets you to do these things. I don't need to find motivation to do this podcast. If anything, I need to hold myself back, guys. So hence why you're getting loads of bonus episodes on conversations I have. But in all seriousness, I would say if you're going to start it, go through a processing stage, go through a contemplation stage like I did. Look at artwork, look at what you want to cover, look at your initial guests. Come up with almost a business plan and a project plan. And what I will say is, guys, bodybuilding is a pretty niche space. And, to talk about topics, to keep thinking, you've got to have a brain that's looking outside the box. For me, that comes with passion, and that also comes with the brain that I have, that I've been gifted. And that's important. But guys, I'm going to say thank you. I'm going to leave it there. What an episode. What a journey we've been on, and long may it continue.